Peace. I'm here at the public library downtown Atlantis, and I just want to elaborate a little bit on, some commonly asked questions that I get. In particular, people often ask me, how can they break down the lessons? How can they show the relationship of the lessons to their life, and how am I able to do that? Also, dealing with supreme mathematics and supreme alphabet. And one thing that I've recognized is a lot of times when you hear people talking about 120 or our lessons, and you hear them talking about supreme math or supreme alphabet, we speak a lot of times in very abstract terms. For example, if today was the 13th, and you ask somebody, how do you see today's mathematics, they may say something like, I see knowledge is the foundation, knowledge is to know, to be aware, you must look, listen, and observe and respect, and that is the first foremost thing that you need to do. Then you got the understanding, which is a reflection of the knowledge, or it's one and the same as the knowledge, or it's to see things for what they are, not what they appear to be, and that all being born is the culture, which is your way of life, and that's fine. And it's talking about a lot of things in principle, but one thing that people need to understand is that facts don't move people. Stories move people. Stories that contain the facts or the principles that you're striving to convey. So it's always important to give a personal example in your life in order to show the relationship and the principles you're talking about. So in other words, if you're talking about knowledge and understanding, all being born, the culture, freedom, and stuff like that, talk about how knowledge is number one, or what it means to be aware of something first. Give a life example. For example, say something along the lines of, I wanted to go and apply for a certain type of job, so it was important for me to know what the requirements were first before I applied for the job, so that I know what to kind of expect when I go in there for an interview, or what questions I need to ask in an interview. That's the first thing that I need to do in order for me to successfully be able to get this job. Knowledge, understanding, see things for what they are, not what they appear to be. Same thing applies. You can see how that is a reflection of knowledge, because you don't want to just go and have these unreasonable expectations or presumptions about what the job is going to entail. You need to do your research. You need to know first, so that once you get in there, you're going to be seeing things for what they are, not what you want them to be. And ultimately, that is going to impact your culture or your way of life, because that is the actual process that you took. Now, everybody can relate to what I just said, and that was just a basic example. But it's important to take these mathematics or the alphabet and our lessons and put them in a practical context. Like I said, facts don't move people. Stories move people, which contain the facts, so you need to put them in a proper context. Another thing that people ask me about is, how are you able to show the relationship in lessons? How are you able to draw different things up? And this is something that you could Google. And the gods and earths, we've been teaching this as long as we've been here. And Google the phrase forcefit analogies. And what that is it's taking two seemingly opposing ideas, or things that seem to have no relationship to each other, and seeing the relationship in these things and learning from something from it. For example, a person and a plant, what do they have in common? Well, the same way a plant uses photosynthesis to convert sunlight into food, we photosynthesize information, and we convert information into food. That is what you consider a force-fit analogy. Now, I'm here in the library, and I just wanted to do something to give you a good example of what a force-fit analogy, or being able to see the relationship in things, actually is. Now, I'm just going to pick up a random book. Okay, this one. Okay, it says, well, I don't know if you could read it, but it says, some bitter taste. What does some bitter taste have to do with what I'm building about right now? Well, the thing about especially pursuing knowledge of self and learning more about who you are, sometimes you're going to be presented with information that does not coincide with what you've been taught before. So it may leave somewhat of a bitter taste in your mouth, because a lot of times everything around you does not reinforce this new information that you're learning, because when you're in a society where being an independent thinker, being a critical thinker is not the status quo or the order to the day, you're not really going to find a lot of examples around you of people who are involved with thinking independently, who are looking at things critically and examining things for what they are, not what they appear to be. And it can be frustrating, it could be challenging, and it also can leave a bitter taste in your mouth, because sometimes you may want to have certain type of discussions with people and they may not be as engaging or willing to talk about certain things because honestly they're not even thinking about that. Now, let's move on. Another book, let's see, blah, 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 blah. Let's see what this says. It says, So Sure of Death. I guess it's like a Leanne Campbell mystery book. Okay, so it's a mystery book, and it says, So Sure of Death. Now, what does this have to do with what I'm talking about right now? Well, surety, in other words, means a sense of security. And going back to what I was talking about in regards to knowledge and understanding, knowledge is a sense of security. When you know something, that means you are aware of what it actually is. And there's a sense of security that comes along with knowing something in relationship to maybe believing or hoping or wishing or things of that nature. That's why we say knowledge is the foundation, because it has a degree of integrity to it. It's strong. It's something that's sure, and it's something that's stable. So this book says, So Sure of Death. That is one thing that all of us, regardless of what we go through in this physical existence, that is sure, and that is death. Meaning, there may be certain things that we may deal with, certain type of goals we have, certain type of things we may be involved in that may not be as sustainable or may not be something that is going to endure. But one thing we all know is that this physical composition is going to go back to from which it came, one particular, somewhere down the line. So death is sure. And like I said, this novel is a mystery novel. So knowledge itself is really the process of solving the mystery or my story, knowing who and what you actually are and your purpose for being here in life. So it's like the ultimate mystery that you could be involved in. And the thing about death is death can be one of our greatest advisors. Meaning, knowing that somewhere down the line you're physically not going to be here anymore, it should be encouraging and prompt you to want to do your best in any type of situation that you're dealing with, because you don't know when you're going to leave this physical plane. Now, moving on to another book. Let's see. This. Solar and Geothermal Energy. What does that have to do with what I'm talking about? Well, when you think about solar energy, we're talking about what is considered today alternative fuel sources, when in reality, that should be the most fundamental fuel source that we should be using, because it's actually in tune with utilizing the natural forces that we have available to us. So, to go inside with what I'm talking about again, finding your purpose in life has a lot to do with you learning what is actually in sync with nature. Going back to what I said about knowledge being sustainable, knowledge being enduring, knowledge having a degree of integrity, your purpose in life will always be something that is in conjunction with nature, because that is the only thing that will and always endures in life. And it's like I said earlier about the analogy with the plant and the human being or a person. The same way a plant utilizes the sunlight and converts it into food so that it can grow, we convert sunlight in the form of knowledge or information into something that we can grow. So the same way that a plant is solar powered, we're solar powered. So, like I said, this book right here talks about energy and the environment. So, our purpose in life has a lot to do with being in sync and being one with our environment. And in a social sense, that means you have to be concerned about your family relationships, you have to be concerned about the community, and you have to be concerned about the city in which you live in, meaning you should be aware of the local politics that's going on, because the local politics will affect the environment, recently in our environment, we've been having a lot of talk and forums and public meetings about fracking. And I'm not sure if any of you are aware of what hydro-fracking is, but that's something else that you could Google, because you might have that going on in your community as well. So that's just another example of a force-fit analogy. And, you know, one beautiful thing that the gods and the earths we teach is that we say supreme mathematics are the keys to showing your relationship to the universe. And that's all that I'm essentially doing. I could identify the relationship in all of these things to my essential self. So everything is interesting to me. Nothing, you know, sometimes you see people and they talk about, well, I'm bored, I ain't got nothing to do. Well, if you realize that everything has a relationship to you, you should never be bored. There should always be something that you can see. And I mean, even if we're sitting here looking at a pile of ants and studying the colony and how they do different things, that's information that you can apply to your own life. Or it may be information that you shouldn't apply to your own life, but you won't know unless you study it. So, you know, I hope that was some insight for some of you who are looking at the lessons and you're wondering, when it talks about why Musa had a hard time civilizing the devil near 2000 BC, how you can identify with having a hard time. You could identify with struggle. You could even see the sweat dripping off Musa's head. You know, so everything has a relationship to yourself, so you have to be able to see yourself in it and how it relates to you. Google force-fit analogies, and that may give you some more insight in how to see these connections and relationships with all things, because if it didn't connect and it didn't relate, then it wouldn't be interdependent. And the fact that the universe is interdependent means that everything has some type of relationship or is corresponding to something else. So with that said, you know, peace.